Story 1. I asked for my annual bonus, which is by law in the Dominican Republic. They had never paid it before. I threatened to sue. They paid me and made me sign a non-disclosure agreement. Sadly for them, coworkers stopped seeing me going around asking and assumed that they had paid me. A year later, they had to pay all that they owed to everyone, former and current employees. Story 2. I didn't have sex with the manager. The manager only hired me because she wanted to sleep with me. After a year of uncomfortable advances and politely declining, she finally straight up asked me, "So, are we going to do this or what?" I gave her a hard no and gave her every reason I didn't want to be involved with her. We work together and I don't mess up where I eat. I was 24 and living with my parents. I wanted to get my feet under me before I focused on anything else. She had occasional violent tendencies, and I didn't want to be a part of that. The type of tendencies that would get me in a fight with somebody at a bar. She was a heroin addict in recovery who frequently joked about relapsing. I was 6 years sober at that time, currently 16 years sober, and did not need the energy of even joking about relapsing around me. She was a stripper who did extras and wouldn't get tested before we got involved. Simple stuff. This might come as a surprise to some, but that type of person isn't exactly stable. She didn't know and went bananas. Some of the things that were said about me were, I was lazy. I abused animals. I stole money. I was watching porn and masturbating at work. I was getting high at work. I was dangerous to be around. Everything was either 100% disproven or not a single shred of proof was given to confirm the accusations. After all these attempts of hers failed, she went to the police with cherry-picked texts making me look like a stalker. She got an emergency no-contact order filed, and 2 police officers showed up at the house and informed me of this in front of my parents. Due to the no-contact order, I couldn't go to any locations she frequently visited until our court date. Well, she frequently went to work, and she also frequently went to a gym where I was an overnight janitor. So I lost both jobs. It was the only 2 times I've been fired. Story 3. One of those anonymous surveys that I know now are definitely not anonymous. Not fired but laid off shortly after being frank about the state of that messed up little company in that survey. Story 4. I was able to do my job remotely when I moved from Utah to Washington. I would fly in and work in the office 1 week a month at my own expense because I thought it was fair to all the moms who worked in the office only 1 day every 2 weeks. Turns out a few people didn't like that I was working remotely, complained, and I got laid off on the last day of my 5th month working in the office. No training or replacement, just hope to cover all the things I did. They went out of business within a year and always asked if I would be willing to do contract work. Story 5. Telling the general manager to put me in another department or I would quit. They did not like that. I guess I was being a little extreme. I am in a better place now. I am exactly like Peter in Office Space. I had a lousy cubicle job with an unpleasant boss, and now I am in concrete construction and happy. Story 6. I was sleeping with my manager who decided to take videos of us being intimate. Long story short, she was telling another coworker about it, sent her the video to brag, and it fell into the hands of human resources. We both got fired and the company shut down about 1.5 years later. Still being intimate, we both got hired by our competitor. Story 7. Me and the cleaning lady engaged in sexual intercourse on the desk in my office. But I tell you, I have to plead ignorance on that one. Because if anyone had said something to me when I started that sort of thing was frowned upon, I never would have done it. I've worked in a lot of offices, and that sort of thing happens all the time. Story 8. COVID-19 affected production, causing a slowdown and a desire to reduce manpower. They monitored emails closely and found a single sentence they used to justify my termination. A friend of mine was a supervisor. They decided to cut manpower and reassigned him to team leader. Team leaders do not have office desk access, whereas supervisors do. Someone emailed me asking why his desk was empty. I responded, he got demoted to team leader, so no more desk. I was fired for slander. I went to him, and he had no idea anything had happened. He pleaded on my behalf. They still fired me. They tried to get me to sign paperwork, but I just smiled and said, "Lawyer time." As I cleaned out my desk, they panicked and tried to call me several times. I took them to unemployment court with copies of emails and a statement from my friend who was involved in the firing. The judge said the firing was beyond ridiculous and granted me full unemployment. I was the only one among a long list of separated employees who fought them in court and won. Story 9. After 3 years working there, I asked to talk to my boss about increasing my salary and showed him a written job offer for much higher pay. I wasn't even asking him to match it, just to get a little bit closer. He fired me so quickly I didn't know which direction was up. But luckily I had a great new employer already lined up. Story 10. Mental breakdown and lots of call-outs. Really surprised I made it this far. I thought for sure I wouldn't be around after that year, but I'm still here and doing much, much better. Story 11. Being one of 2 people on a team when my manager was ordered to perform the quarterly performance improvement plans. Surpassed all requirements but basically was a loaded coin flip as to who was the bottom 10% since the other guy was a level 4 and I was a level 3. Amazon needs to find their soul and realize firing people for existing every 3 months is evil. Story 12. I was pregnant and hiding it and had terrible all-day sickness. I would disappear frequently throughout the day to vomit. I was told I was disappearing and unproductive, which was true. So I got fired from my veterinary technician job. Story 13. My manager was almost 50, and I worked that Saturday and bought 2 mugs. I guess my card was locked, so it didn't go through. I came in that Monday. The assistant manager came up to me and asked if I sold any mugs. I told them no, but I bought 2, and then they told me it didn't go through on the computer. So I paid for them again. The next day I walked in, and my boss told me she had to fire me because that's technically taking money out of the register. Those cups were $30 each, so I spent $60 just to get fired the next day. No, we did not have any discounts or anything. We were supposed to, but the manager didn't want to give the code out to anyone, so she was the only one getting a discount. Story 14. Lost my job after I told the boss that they were the worst excuse for a chief executive officer and how they messed up their own organization. Was given a poor review after that and then threatened to sue the company for retaliation. Story 15. Last time I got fired was about 20 years ago. It was because I was not a good employee. I hated working there. It was a terrible environment. Everyone's morale was terrible. But at the end of the day, my poor work ethic is what got me fired, and I should have just quit. Story 16. I was 19. We had a new manager from up north, and she was vile. On her first day, she put all of the promotional loyalty cards inside the till and said that people needed to pay full price for a full round of drinks before they could use the loyalty card, which was ridiculous because the card would have got them their drinks for £1 each, which upset everybody. Then, on her second day and after a 12-hour shift in a busy city center pub, she asked me to clean all of the beer taps with a toothbrush and then to polish all of them. At 3 a.m., I refused. She said if you don't like it, you can leave. So I took my shirt off, put it over her head, and walked out, while throwing the lanyard at her over my shoulder. Even though I quit, she said I was fired. 3 other staff members followed me out the door, and the next day nobody showed up for work. I was given my job back with a promotion to supervisor and she was fired. Story 17. Apparently it was because I wasn't where they wanted me to be in terms of progress. They never told me how much I needed to progress, where I was, and didn't give me access to tools to fix any mistakes I made. But then again, it might have been me. I had a few weeks off due to a car accident. A car pulled out in front of me on a 60 road. I made a few mistakes, and I apparently don't look interested or enthusiastic, so who knows. Story 18. My boss walked in on me being intimate with his wife, who was also my boss. I was 17. I couldn't refuse. He walked in mid-stroke and fired me on the spot. I was rehired the next day. Story 19. Saying, I want to commit a hate crime, to a computer that took 4 hours to display a single character on the screen, only to find out there was a person of color behind me who heard it and reported it to Human Resources. I didn't have a problem with him. He was a cool cat. Story 20. Unionizing and walking out on our shift. They lowered our pay differential from $3 per hour down to 10 cents per hour for working the swing shift without notice, and we talked with them for 2 weeks before this happened. We got them in the end, with the Board of Labor being involved, but everyone else chickened out when the number got over $10,000 and decided not to go for broke. At the point the others caved and I gave in to the settlement, we had been out of a job for about 12 weeks. This was at the beginning of COVID-19, so the extra COVID-19 funding was helping a lot for those of us who had applied for unemployment, but many had not or took the first denial as the end. Being fired really messes with your self-esteem. Story 21. I interviewed and got a job in a stable state of mind. A couple of weeks later, I went into a manic episode, thank you bipolar, and it lasted 2 days before getting fired because I was saying wild things to my coworkers and a customer. Story 22. I have fired dozens of people in my career. 99% of the time, it is the sole responsibility of the person getting fired. People mess up and do it themselves. The 1% are people who get caught up in something through no fault of their own. Story 23. I told the chief executive officer that appeasing investors in his Microsoft Teams meetings is not hard work, and that he doesn't know what a real job even looks like. I was fed up with that job and had just had enough. Story 24. Only been fired once. I was hired to fill the position of an engineer who moved to another part of the state. I started working on some big projects they were rolling through. They basically redesigned or made entirely new every single product they produced over the course of around 3 years. The day after we finished that process, I was let go. I was never replaced or anything. It was merely a financial choice, but it certainly wasn't one I agreed to when taking the job. Story 25. Worked in a collision shop and I was going through a bad breakup at the time. I was cleaning up the car corral, which was surrounded by a fence, and right outside the fence was a dumpster. From where the truck I used was parked, you could pull through the entrance of the car corral to right beside the dumpster. I was throwing away cardboard, and after I got done, I was going to back up the truck into the spot. I was crying heavily while I was working and was distracted by my tears. I accidentally hit the side of the fence post at the opening of the car corral and damaged the side of the truck I was driving. I told my boss, he flipped out on me, and I got fired. That wasn't a good month. Story 26. The home office came to visit and fired both me and my female coworker because we were both married. You know what that means? Either one of us could have gotten pregnant. Story 27. I used the store computer to look up an address of a funeral home for a customer who came in lost, looking for where her brother's funeral was. It was a couple of blocks away. I was new to the area myself, so I didn't know offhand, and I knew I wasn't allowed to use my personal cell phone while on the clock. They called it time fraud and fired me. I was just trying to help out. Story 28. The one and only time I have been fired, I was a receptionist at a car dealership. A lady kept calling and asking to be transferred to my coworker's department, so I transferred her. The trouble was that my coworker was avoiding her calls. The customer got mad at me for getting a voicemail and cursed me out even though I had nothing to do with it. I said something to my coworker like, "It is not my job to handle your customers' issues," because it wasn't. Little did I know she was in a relationship with the owner and got me fired because heaven forbid she actually do her job. Story 29. I was a dishwasher at a diner and did not wash the dishes well. At 15, I was working from 5 a.m. to noon every Saturday and Sunday. I lasted 1 month before getting fired. Story 30. Absent-mindedly asked the boss's brother, who was being paid to read a book on company time, to hold a door for us while we carried heavy deliveries in from the rain. The boss made my manager dad fire me. Story 31. Cussing out a customer who gave me attitude because I would not check him in early. I simply did not want to because I am lazy. Hated that job and felt like being difficult. Knew that would be my only time to get fired and not care, so I took the opportunity. Story 32. I worked at Safeway in high school. My friend worked in the Starbucks in the Safeway. They were closing the Starbucks and about to pour the coffee down the drain, so she gave me a coffee. The next day, we both got fired and were banned from all Safeways in Canada. Story 33. I told my nominal boss that she would be better off just sitting in her office and listening to right-wing talk radio all day instead of coming into the cubicle farm and trying to manage us. The incident that sparked this was when one of my team made an argument that was an analogy, and despite all of us taking 20 minutes to try to explain how the two parts of the argument were parallel, she couldn't understand it. After I said this, I spun on my heel and walked out into the hallway, and the chief executive officer was standing right there. He's like, "Sorry, bud, you're done," though it was clear he was only doing it because he had to. I had another job literally 7 hours later. Story 34. I got injured at work. It was my second time on workers' compensation with unbearable pain. I use Delta 9 occasionally. It's legal in North Carolina. They randomly drug test me without cause or do oversight since they hadn't done it when I was out on workers' compensation before. I knew I would fail the test, and I told my manager the truth. I thought the truth would lead to a better outcome, but I got fired the following Monday. I never went to work high or hungover. I only used edibles on Friday or Saturday. I admit some fault here, but losing a good employee over what they do in their free time seems a little unreasonable. I got a work-from-home job that doesn't care about marijuana. I keep tabs on my old place of employment. They are losing people rapidly. They still haven't filled my position. I should have left sooner. The place made me extremely depressed and suicidal. I'm better off now and was able to reduce my medications to just an antidepressant.